What is up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Powerline Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Ryan Lucas. All right, it has been brought to my attention. Well, I've known this for a while. I know that there's way more listeners out there than there is followers/subscribers. So I'm going to ask you guys to make sure that you follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on, because it's not me that cares so much. It's the people that you got to report the information to, or the algorithm that really cares about those stupid numbers like followers and subscribers, right? So just do me a favor, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. I'll quit pestering you about it. All right, let's dive into this week's episode of Powerline Podcast. Enjoy. David, thanks for making the time for this, making the effort to be on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, happy to do it, man. It's funny. I listened for a while. When you listen, you don't see yourself in the chair.
Yeah.
So like I'm in here, I'm like, wow, this is different than I had in my head. It's cool. I think it's phenomenal for the industry, for everybody, right? So I was reading through some feedback on the podcast, Apple podcast thing, where you can type in reviews, and so I was like, man, this is great for everybody in the industry, and it's so true. Like as a safety person, I spend as much time as I can out there in the field to stay grounded in the work, but I also listen here because it's really insightful to get, man, there's such a diversity of perspectives about the trade and the challenges and the struggles, and it sometimes it helps me solve problems, and sometimes it makes me think differently about things that we're thinking about. So, man, I think what you're doing here, and the investment in the resource is really valuable for folks.
Thanks. I had Jack, Maul, and Matt in here yesterday, and we were just talking after we turned the show off. We're talking about the podcast industry and kind of like what's going on. There's not many companies like Quanta, and I don't want to just like promote like, and that was never the heart of Powerline Podcast, was to like pump any one company or not, but like the fact that Quanta recognized that this is a great way to try to communicate and just allow the show to continue being as like neutral and just, it's facts. It's just like, it's like regular conversation. We're not here trying to like, I'm not trying to like promote one thing or another. I just want to provide value to anybody listening. And it's such a great way to do it, because there's not many, if you want to say like the Fortune 500 companies or 200 companies that have a show like this, or even trying to communicate in a way like this and keep it neutral and, just facts.
Yeah, man, so I think it's important to understand too, it's not about arrogance, right? Yeah. I think about it even in my own role in the reach. When you think about the position we're in, right? I always tell people like heavy lies the crown, right? When you have the reach that we have, it's like a very unique position to be here. Like think about like my job. Like I get a perspective of the line culture from the Northwest to Southern California to Texas to Florida, union, non-union. I interact with every major utility in the industry, and that's from a safety perspective. Our engineers do the same thing, our project managers, our executives. Like we just have this, like we're positioned to learn so much from the industry. I actually think it's a sense of humility that like when you get that fortune to be able to learn that much, like you've got to give back. And I view it as like it's giving back, right? It's giving back to the business that built us.
Yeah. I see it still in conversations I have with, you could relate this back to growing up in a small town, and then you leave that small town and see the big world. It's like, I come from my background, a small line company in, one sector of Canada, one province, small town. You get this kind of like tunnel vision of just like what's going on around you, right? But like you said, with a business like this that is not just in every state, but in multiple countries, like you get a big perspective, and it's really nice to be able to take that, what you learn, and, share it with people that are still in, and that's their whole life is that small town. That's where they want to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then they get to get their eyes open to like what's going on in the world as far as the industry that they're involved with. Like there's not a lot of podcasts or mediums like this that are sharing information like that. And that's just what I love about it. And that kind of what keeps me driving forward with it is like, man, I've learned so much. It's like the comments I get, man, I've learned so much about like what goes on in Florida or, the South or like East Coast of Canada or something, like they get different perspectives from different people about the industry that they're directly related in. And I just think that like, it's so cool.
Well, we talked about that book, The Go-Giver, you got us sitting there, right? And I was like psyched when I saw it because that's a change in perspective. I mean, if you want anything from this world, like you better give to it.
Yeah.
Like if you want to grow and if your goal is to be the best, like don't ever think you're in a position to stop giving. Like as a matter of fact, I think the bigger you get, the more you need to give.
Yeah. And the key caveat there is to give without expectation as well.
Yeah.
And that's always what we've tried to do with this is like, I just want to give you some value. I'm not expecting things in return. And that's when you get the most value out of your giving. And you get the most back is when you actually give without expectation of return. But it just comes back naturally. That's life.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What mission are you on?
Oh, what mission am I on? Man, that's a really good question. My mission is to make the industry better. Like I always want to see the industry grow and get better. Like I've learned in life. We talked about. I was with some quanta folks last week, and we were talking about this like mission for perfection. Like if you chase perfection in your life, you're probably going to stall out because perfection is just never reality. But like you better be chasing getting better. Yeah. Like when you chase getting better, you're going to be pretty badass at some point, right? And I think that's the mission with safety is like how do we help the organization? How do we help the industry continue to grow and be a better place for journeymen to enter in? So like my give back, right? So my mission in safety, so many people gave to me early in my career. Like, so I'll give you my quick story. I shouldn't be where I'm at. I grew up in Los Angeles, right? Inner city, no connectivity to real work, right? I get into college. I thought I was going to be a math major. I got into doing a 4-hour math problem one night and was like, man, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. So some buddies talked me into taking a safety class, right? So I get into safety. I'm like, wow, this is like pretty interesting. For some, don't ask me why, man. It just captured me, right? So I'm in a class and I had to draw from a hat on industries to understand. Like we had to come in and research industries. So I literally draw from a hat and it says, how does electricity go from power plants to a house? I'm like, dude, that sounds pretty cool. And I start researching. I'm like enthralled, immediately just enthralled, right? So I come in like 2 weeks later. It was like, I had to start seeking out getting an internship. So I go to school and I'm like, hey, I don't want like an internship. What are the best? I want the best. Challenge me. And they go, well, we got 2 really important relationships. One's with Budweiser. And I'm like, dude, count me in. Like, yeah, I didn't even want to hear the next one, right? So like, yeah, we can get you in with Budweiser, or the next one is Public Service Company in New Hampshire, which is I was living up in New England going to school. And I'm like, no way. I just did this thing. And I got into the business literally from drawing something from a hat, right?
Dang.
So I get in and I'm working with them, and I had the opportunity. They had just started back up doing pre-apprentices. Like they hadn't, early 2000s, a lot of utilities, they hadn't brought new linemen in for a long time. So I got to go through the pre-apprenticeship, learned a lot about the business, but eventually made my way out. I'm 22 years old, and I'm a safety guy in Hartford, Connecticut, at a service center that doesn't know line work outside of what I learned in this pre-apprenticeship I just went to, right? And if it wasn't for guys going out of their ways to teach me the business, man, I'd never be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have, I met my wife through the business. I have a beautiful 4-year-old girl. I have a life that I love. I have a career that I wake up every day, excited. I found my calling, right? I love coming to work to do what I do. But I'm here because there are some linemen early in my career that really extended themselves and went out of their way to help me understand the trade. And I'll never forget that. And it always will leave me with a sense of wanting to get back to the business. I may not have gotten to the safety world, from the craft. So I'll never have the experience that a lot of our tradesmen do. But I was built by the craft, right? And I have this obligation to give back to us. That's always kind of weighed on me quite a bit.
What do you think it was? What did the linemen have, or what did you have, or a combination of both, that made that work, that made them want to invest in you, and vice versa? Because if I remember back to when we were just talking about this before, if I remember back to when I was on the tools, and that relationship between safety guys and your safety professionals and the line crews, it was always contentious at best, usually it's pretty tough relationship to manage. So what was it that you were doing or they were doing? Why invest in you?
I put in time. I cared. They saw that I cared, and they saw that I was willing to put up with it. They tested me, right? And so funny story. So, and I'm probably 6 months into the gig. It's first storm season, right? So we roll out upstate New York. We're in this old dark hotel. It's nighttime. We just got there. I'm talking to some of the management folks, and I look over, and some of the crews from my service center over at the bar, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna go hang out with my guys." And they pulled me aside. They're like, "I wouldn't do that." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Why wouldn't I go hang out? Man, they're at the bar. I wouldn't do that." I'm like, "I'm gonna go hang out with my guys." Whew. that was, I felt like a mouse being pawed at by a cat, right? They were going to town on this 22-year-old kid. It was, they teed me up, and I go back, I'm walking towards the elevator, and I see that management guy, and he goes, "Told you so." But I looked at him like, dude, why would I not go hang out with my people? But really interesting thing, the next morning, elevator door opens, I walk out, and one of the linemen is there, and he goes, "Hey, you got beat up last night, right?" I said, "Oh, yeah, a little bit." He goes, "Dude, those guys will do nothing but respect you now." He's like, "Go back and hang out with them today. I guarantee you're going to have a different conversation." He just walks away, right? And that really opened my eyes. Man, it's a tough industry. And a lot of times it's a tough crowd, especially if you position yourself as an outsider, which is easy to do. If you're not from the trade, dude, you're an outsider, right? But it's not hard to build the relationships if you just demonstrate that you're willing to put up with the shit, right? And I think more importantly that you care, and that you're not going to be arrogant about it.
I love what you said there about building relationships, and I think people should really focus more on what it takes to build meaningful relationships, because you can, if you're, like you said, you're already an outsider, right? And that is how we in the crew would see safety professionals, unless they were somehow brought into the crew, right? But it takes work to make that happen on both fronts. So you might have to, even if it's not something you like doing, is going and hanging out in bars, you need to spend time with them somehow, and a lot of them, that's their after hours, especially on the road. That's what they're doing. You have to bridge that gap somehow. You have to either get them out of that situation and into another one where you can build a relationship or hang out with them there, but you have to like not separate yourself further. You have to like make yourself part.
You have to be a part of the family, right? So like part of my career when I left the utility, I came to work for PAR 2005, and I spent my time on some big projects and on the road, with the crews, and year on this project, picking up, moving, to 2 states over to do the next line. And you can't be an outsider. Like, it's super easy to do that. It's super easy to say like us, them, and I'm going to live my life and they're going to live their life. Like, you've got to become part of the family. And again, like I have this philosophy, like the more you invest in yourself, the more other people will invest in you. And I tell that to young folks all the time. Like, if you get in there and you show that you roll your sleeves up and you learn, and that time's precious. Why am I going to help you grow if you're not going to like develop from that? Like, sure. I'm not going to waste my time, right? But if I watch how you handle yourself and I see that you're smart, you care, you thrive, you're ambitious, man, now that investment, that 20 minutes I'm going to sit down and talk to you about what a cut and kick is, because you don't know what that means, that's valuable to me, because I know I'm going to get something on the other end of that, right? So I think as young folks entering into the relationship, you've got to find ways to add value and show that you want to improve yourself.
100%. Talk about the rest of your journey to where you're at now.
Man, so I've just had a lot of really, I think, for a safety professional, like unique experiences through our business. So I started off working inside of utilities. I think I got kind of into more of a management role too fast, and I felt like I was too young to be away from the trucks. So I had an opportunity to go work for Power Electric. Left the utility, went to work for PAR, and man, that was the best move I ever made, because man, talk about, from the utility to go and be a safety person in the construction world, like you live on the trucks, right? So, worked in Colorado, was able to get onto some big projects out in West Virginia. We did a big, I think 250-mile 500 line, and so invaluable to live on that project. And I kind of got stuck. Like, my big thing is growth. Like, I've always been one of those people, like, I want to grow.
Yeah.
And if I'm not getting better, and it's not grow like title wise, like I want to feel like I'm getting better. I want to feel like I'm learning. And I kind of got in a role where I wasn't learning anymore. So I got frustrated and went back into the utility world for 7 years. And super valuable experience, actually. Like, I was able to, I got to see other parts of the business. I got to spend time in inner city Boston, right? I got to see how the underground network works. And because of my interest in spending time in the field, like, I spent time in the manholes, I spent time in the tunnels and the channels under those canals in Boston, understanding that work. And, I had some opportunities to do a lot of substation stuff. And so I look back on my career, like I've been exposed to a lot of different parts of the business. And while I'm by no means a master of any of it, it allows me to have a pretty, from a safety guy's perspective, pretty unique attribute that I can kind of bounce from a substation conversation underground to transmission pretty quick. One of the things that, we talked a little bit about grounding, like one of the things that really hit me early on. So it was like one of my first days working for the utility. I walk in one morning and it's just a somber room, man. I'm like, what happened? They had a fatality the day prior. Gary Cerruti died in a induction event, right? So it was 345 line. He went up to clip the static. Static wasn't bonded. It was actually pretty low voltage contact, but it was enough that it took him, right? Yeah. And really rattled the business. His brother Ron worked there. So I got to work the next 4 years next to his brother Ron. I saw the impact that something like that has. And it, I like to study, I like to learn. I just immerse myself in the world of grounding, try to understand, like, what is this stuff, and, like, how do you make sense of it, and how do you talk about it in ways that I don't sound like an engineer, because I don't think people want to hear an engineer's perspective on grounding.
That's how you have to look at it sometimes, though. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Like, it's that's the crazy thing with electricity is like you just have to do the math on it. Like it, as soon as you do, and it's not complex either. Like it's literally, you can break it down to like Ohm's law. Like it's pretty simple equation as far as equations and the math world go. It's no 4-hour equation. It's like 3 numbers. Just start doing the math on resistance in places like, and it's pretty easy to see like what could happen or what is going to happen a lot of times with.
Yeah, and I think we do a pretty good job of that now through the lazy cues, taking that and built that into the curriculum to try to like, so much of safety is like teaching people the why. And the worst thing a safety person can do is go out there and just say, do it. I mean, even if you come from the trade, like even if you're, you know, I know trades folks that are out there in safety and they're the barkers and just do it, right? But like if you're not explaining the why, then you're not building people, right? And I think, you know, I think we've gotten to a point with our curriculum where we're doing a better job teaching the why. And I think where we're at now is we're doing a better job on, like, you can't always teach the how. Like, why is important, but why doesn't teach me how to do it in the like variety of situations you find yourself in when you're,
especially on that subject, grounding and bonding, and
it's unbelievable, right? I mean, I was on calls yesterday talking about wire string and grounding, and that's just, listen, you know, wire pulling setups, grounding on a wire, like there's something to talk about there, right?
100%.
But how do you have the conversation in a way that you don't have to take 4 hours to get someone for the light bulb to go off? Like, it's got to simplify it. So I think that experience early on, you know, really helped. It showed me how safety impacts people. Watching the business really real from that, dealing with his brother. And his brother like wasn't even directly involved, but I mean it.
Because saying we just had Jack and Matt in here yesterday to talk about AEDs, and we started talking about induction situations, and that's one thing I mentioned was like how amazing it is to have a device like this now for something like induction, and how many lives could have been saved in the past, because often induction is such a low voltage that you're not ending up with burns as well. It gets stopping your heart. So if you can get somebody's heart going again, chances are they're going to live a great life after and have like really no side effects. It's not like they're burned or, you know, have exit wounds and entry wounds and lost an arm or a leg. Like it's usually just, it stopped your heart. And so we're just trying to encourage the companies out there to get these devices on every job site and like everywhere, because there's really, it's a small barrier of entry now to get into the AED world. And
you know, I think back to that event I talked about, like an AED. I mean, you never know. Like, there's no 100% certainty. But man, is he probably with us today? Man, there's probably a really good chance he's still with us today. Your ability to recover from an event, if you have an AED, is phenomenal. Your ability to impact the community as a company is phenomenal, man. Like when we think to our stories, you know, of the saves, it's not all like industrial accidents. Actually,
50% of it's bystanders and family members, and
it's personal stuff that happens. Either sometimes it's to our coworkers, where we have somebody. A lot of them are heart attacks that happen in the show up, right? It's family members. It's a crew that was driving by a neighborhood. A mom came running out and panic stricken because their child's in arrest, right? And we just happen to have the tool to be able to help in this situation. Like, people gotta think bigger than what they're dealing with today. Like it's a life-saving tool, and it's a tool that helps you impact the communities that you work in, and it changes people's lives. So that's really important. That changing people's lives thing, I think, is a really important one. And I think about that a lot in the game of safety. So we talked kind of like, you don't get a lot of feedback in safety, right? Like there's not a like, hey, we were safe today because of you. Like,
like you said, you don't turn around and look and go, that's what I built today.
No, I don't pull away. Yeah, I mean, like as a matter of fact, you get a lot of negative feedback because you see problems that aren't getting solved, and it just aggravates the snot out of you, right? But I try to put it in perspective, and I force myself to think about this quite a bit, and I tell the story because I want others to think about it from this perspective. I'm in Washington, in Seattle. Just finished up with a week with one of our operating units up there, and Friday morning, 5 a.m., I'm in the Marriott right outside the airport, right? And I get down to the lobby waiting for my van so I can go across the street and get home, find my family, and I'm standing there. I don't know, I hadn't had my coffee yet, right? Because I hadn't gone through security, and I'm like, just pulling through, and I hear, Quana or something in the background, and I turn around, and it ended up being the foreman from one of our companies out there from Patelco, right? So, we get in a really cool conversation about the work he's doing. You could tell, super guy. And he introduces me to his family, right? He's got his wife and 2 daughters with him, and they're on their way to Puerto Vallarta. He's like, yeah, we're going to Puerto Vallarta. It's going to be fun. So I let the conversation wrap up so he could be with his family, and I kind of stepped back, and we ended up getting on the shuttle together. I'm watching, right? And he's got his daughter in his lap, and she's bouncing, and she smiled. The other daughter's goofing around, smiling at him. The wife just heard the cool conversation about the work that her husband does, and and it just dawns on me all of a sudden. That's what we screw up. Like, when we don't get safety right, that's what we screw up. Yeah. And I think we've got to ground ourselves in that reality as much as we possibly can. Like, people matter. Like, people in this trade matter. And I think that comes from a safety perspective. It comes from a mental health perspective. It comes from all these different perspectives. Like, we've got to care about the people that we bring in to work for us. And what is it that we do every day that adds to them and that builds them and that puts them in a position to get on that bus, have their little girl look into their eyes like daddy's a god, right? On their way to Puerto Vallarta to party their butts off, as a family for a week. Like, and we're in a position to be able to help make that happen. Like, we can make that happen. It's a pretty cool way to look at it, right?
That's your moment where you turn around and go, I built that. Like, I helped build that, That's my project.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I was going to ask, and maybe that's a piece of it, how has your philosophy on safety changed over the course of your career now, from that 22-year-old to where you're at now?
I don't know how much has changed, or as much as I've matured and grown and experienced more, I can kind of articulate some of those gut feelings I had when I was early into the business. So I remember, being 23 years old, being in this conference room with an executive and, a couple management folks, and, a guy had cut out and broke his leg, and we're doing the investigation. And man, these guys are just beating this dude up. Like, situational awareness, like he should have been cut out. Like, when you're climbing, you got to be focusing on what you're doing. And I was young. I didn't know anything, but all I knew intuitively, dude, this conversation makes no sense. Like, you're really going to expect this guy to do all that work and focus on gaff precision every single time they're working their way up the pole? Like, that doesn't seem to be right. I saw us coming up with solutions with the people inside of that room, and I'd watch those solutions get thrown out to the field, and the crew being like, what the hell is this? Like, this, come on. And none of that made sense, and I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know what to do to fix it. But I think as I've gone through the business, what I've realized, and I think I had it early on, I just didn't know how to say it, is we've got to listen to our people. Our people are so smart about safety, so smart about safety, too smart. Yeah. I think they're so smart about safety, sometimes we get ourselves into trouble, right? Yeah. And I think for too long, when it came to safety, management was arrogant. A lot of management came from the trade, so they would manage when I was a lineman, and what we did to people for the first 15 years of my career was so unfair when it came to safety. Like we had unrealistic expectations. Like I even think, and it still happens a little bit today. It
like
carries
zero
over.
incidences.
Yeah, a job brief. Like we're gonna berate a foreman because he didn't add the piece of timber that ended up on the job site. I wasn't there at 7 a.m. It didn't show up until 11, and somebody tripped over it, and we didn't capture that on the job brief. At 7, we're gonna skewer somebody over that. Like that's not reasonable. So I think why I love what I'm doing today is what we're doing with the capacity model. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're using that as a tool to challenge everything we've ever done with safety in the past. Like we've got to be realistic with the folks that are doing, and it's funny, we do these conversations with folks now. We go around, and I remember the first time we were talking about like the human performance principles. I wasn't there, but the story I got secondhand was we're up in Vancouver, and we're meeting with some of our folks up there, and we go through these principles, and it's all talking about like, hey, people do what they do for a reason. Like, and like no one's trying to get burned right now. Like the step they took right before they got burned, like it made sense to them.
Yeah.
Like if they knew the next thing they were going to do was going to be an arc flash, they would not have proceeded, right?
100%.
It talks about like how work as we imagine it in a room is totally different than how it actually gets executed. Because like I have to adapt nonstop when I'm doing the work. Like when I think about work, I think about perfection. When I do work, I'm dealing with the box of crap you handed me, and I got to figure out how to make your rules adapt to this, right? Like that's the reality. So we go up and we have this conversation with the folks, and like they're looking at us, they're like, dude, finally you guys get it. Like this is the first time in my career I've ever talked to management about safety where I feel like you get it, right? They even went as far as saying like, hey, there's a mission statement out there in the wall, like go rip that thing down, and like that stuff you just talked about us, like put that on the wall. Yeah. So perspective as it's grown, it's really about like how do we have the right conversations with the folks doing the field and let them help us make safety easier for them to do.
Love that. I want to dive into leadership a little bit, but this is kind of on the leadership topic. I think companies should focus more on training that might be a little bit outside of what you're directly trying to do, like your direct job. So here's an example. Say like you want to be a journalist. Taking a creative writing course, it's probably a good idea, sure. But taking something just outside of that, like say something about communications or something that might indirectly help you with what you're trying to do. Maybe here's a better example. I read a story about a dad who had his son in boxing. And he was in boxing, and he was becoming a really good boxer. He was just a young kid. And he pulled him out of boxing, and he put him in ballet for 5 years. Didn't box for 5 years, put him in ballet for 5 years. Took him out of ballet after that 5 years, put him back in boxing, and focused on boxing. He ended up with the best footwork in the business. Danced around the ring. So, like, I think some things in our industry could be related the same way. Like, take that foreman, for example. Could we think about getting them in communications or public speaking classes? Because sometimes delivering that job briefing is the scariest freaking thing that guy's going to do, because he has to stand in front of 7 people or 12 people or a whole job site full of 100 guys and give a job briefing. He might be scared to death to do that. So, like, could we help develop that part so that he can actually deliver the message? I don't know. There's just different ways of thinking about these things that I think just have never really been thought about because maybe they're too soft.
So let's tie that in the conversation we just had, I think, about how we need to engage our folks on solving our problems. So, like, funny, we had an issue in South Carolina with barricading trucks, right? And like the old way of doing it was like, we're gonna do a safety blitz. We're gonna get all these safety folks, and we're gonna get all these management, and we're gonna tell them we mean business, and we're gonna just brute force people to fix the barricading issue. So we said, that's never worked in the past. Why don't we just like listen to the people at the barricade and hear like what the struggle is? And we brought them in, and we heard the struggle, like, and it was real. Like, we made it so stinking complicated. Like, something as simple as barricading. Like, we screwed that up so bad. These guys didn't know what the hell they were supposed to be doing anymore, right? So part of the solution was like, okay, so we need to revise the procedure because the procedure clearly doesn't work, right? So, hey, guys, you guys have to barricade. Like, you do the work. Like, you guys come in the room. Let's write the procedure. You guys do it. And it was funny, like, they're 45 minutes into it, and we walk down the hall, and one of them comes out and goes, hey, I got to talk to you quick. He goes, dude, we always thought you guys were dumbasses when you wrote these things in the past. Like, we're trying to write this procedure in, like, a way that it works. It's, like, super hard, man.
Yeah.
Like, they had a totally different perspective on, like, rules, right? And they get it. Like, we're trying to do the right thing, but we don't always hit the mark, right?
Yeah.
So we gave that person a really unique perspective, and I think he'll use that in his career. So I think about that dynamic and marry it with what you just said. Like, how do we get people from the field more engaged in safety roles where we're helping them be parts of the solution? That's outside their comfort level. And some of them are going to fight us on it. Like, they don't want it. Don't, like, just leave me on the damn truck, right? Like, but I think we almost got to pull them out and engage them 100%. And solving some of these problems, and they're going to make us better at safety, and they're going to make themselves, because they're going to get a different perspective of the business, right, than they had before.
I seen that done once where we had a safety incident where guys cut a piece of wire open and it wasn't jumpered out, and big flash, and our safety guy took that incident and did a bunch of the math back. What happened was there was a Delta connection on one of the big stores or something like that was nearby. So that, anyway, when they cut the wire, it was just a minor blip. It wasn't what it could have been. And he worked out an equation and a scenario and put it into the next training program. So made maps himself and made this equation and all of this. And these guys didn't know that they were doing the math and the work on the incident that they were in 2 months ago when they came in for the safety training. So they're doing all, and about halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, a couple of the guys, you could significantly, like, you could see it click with them. Like, this is all looking a little bit familiar. And they worked out all the math, and they worked it out. If it had been a Y-connected circuit and they cut that piece of wire open, it would have been a ginormous ball of fire in their face. But taking that incident, working it into training where they had to figure out what could have happened in the end, and they figured it out, and then having that aha moment completely changed their behavior after that. Like, they went into the job they did the next day thinking about things differently and making sure that they had their T's crossed and their I's dotted. Not, it changed their behavior. Well, and I like that.
We taught them the why.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think we do enough of that. Like, I go back to the start of my career. Like, not only did I have people that went out of their way, like the line culture I was first introduced to, the distribution crews, at least, man, to this day, like, some of those disciplined journeyman linemen I've ever been around. Right. And they could talk to you about the difference in rubber gloving methods from when you're on 23 kV to how that changes when you're on 34.5. And, like, as an outsider who doesn't know the craft, rubber gloving, like, why would it change? But, like, and these guys, they would call work methods folks and say, hey, I'm in a pickle. Like, I can't figure this out. Like, let's talk this through. Like, they used resources that were available to them. Like, they're just super, super disciplined linemen, right? And I've never forgotten what that looked like, and I think about that all the time. Like, and I worry that sometimes, like, do we always have that level of discipline? I think, like, we did certain things in a way. Like, I get in this conversation with folks on safety a lot. Like, you don't want to build robots. Like, you don't build robots, right? And I totally get that. But there's also, like, things that I think are really healthy habits, right? And, like, one of the things that they did up there, and I'm not just talking about discipline, right? Like, beat it into me was, when you're making and breaking connections, everything's on with the stick, off with the stick. Like, if I'm lifting a tap, yep, it's off with the stick, right? It didn't matter that tap fed an open cutout. Yep. Their discipline was like, because if I put myself in a position to pick and choose when I'm going hands-on versus when I'm using the stick, I might make a mistake. there was discipline about not touching the truck when the guys were aloft in the air. I'll never forget the first time I'm leaning on a truck and the guy walks up and slaps my hand. I fell face first on a till door, right? But the message was like, get your ass off the truck, right? We don't touch trucks when the guys are in the air. And that stuff was really that discipline was handed down when they brought new people on the crews. And I'm a studier. I watch dynamics constantly, right? I wish I saw more of that taking place. And it's, funny experience, right? I'm out on a job in the Midwest one time, and I'm watching, right? And I'm watching this foreman. He was a little bit of a barker, right? But he's constantly communicating with the guys in the air. And he'd let him get so far, and he'd stop and be like, whoa, you got to slide that grip out. You're at a bad angle. Get that grip out, and you're going to be able, like, he was handling him, right? So I'm under a tree at lunch talking to another foreman that was on the site, and I was saying, I'm like, I watched that dynamic, like that's super important. We need more of that. And he goes, yeah, but guys don't like working for him. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, dude, they don't like being told what to do all day long. I'm like, ugh. I get it.
Yeah,
I totally get it. I'm not naive, but man, he was disciplined, and he was trying to build linemen to do work like the right way.
That's where I think the delivery method he might have just had wrong, right? And that's where I think like some training in your communication and the way that you communicate and your delivery of what you're trying to do. Because like his heart might have been like, hey, I want to get everybody home. I'm trying to get the job done safely and efficiently. I see it one way, and I'm trying to lead this. But the guys in the air are seeing it as this guy's just barking at me all day long. And it's like, it's a communication thing for everybody on the crew. That's another thing that I noticed about how I was raised, in line work. How I was raised, where I came from, was we communicated. That you're in the bucket with one person for 8-10 hours. You need to talk to each other. You need to be separate the ego and talk to each other. Like, let them know, like, hey, you got a phase over your left shoulder. It's pretty close. Okay, thanks. Not, fuck, I know it's there. Like, piss off. Like, that's what you get from so many people. Like, I know it's there. I'm a journeyman. I know. Okay. You know everything. It's like dealing with a child. I know. Like, that's all you hear from children. But like, you don't know. You can't see it. I know you think you know, but it's closer than you. I don't know. It's that sort of mentality. Like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to communicate with you. And like when you're moving wire with the bucket, it's like the guy on the controls is looking one direction and the guy beside you is looking the other direction, because you can only see this way. You don't have eyes on the back of your head. You don't know what that phase is doing and the span behind you. And it's teamwork and it's communication. And I think there could be more learned there or more taught there.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you, because I even see that with safety professionals. Like, again, like most safety professionals have the best intent in the world. Like, we want to help you get home. Like, that's what a safety person's there to do. Like, at least the ones that care and that really should be in the role. That's the way they are, right? Yeah. And the delivery, isn't always the best. And so I agree, like teaching people how to interact with each other. And we're starting to do that with some of our safety professionals. I think we need to leak it out. One of my early mentors in my career was really, really good at that. And I guess the fancy word is emotional intelligence, but it's like, how do you understand where people are coming from? And like, I have to do it with my wife. Like, my wife loves me, and I love my wife to death. And then sometimes, like, she's giving me feedback, and after a while, I'm like,
yeah,
right. We all have to learn how to be able to handle those with humility. But the other thing is, I'm going to bring it back to try to operationalize a little bit what we're doing with the capacity model. Here's at the heart of it. That's at the heart of it. If you're putting yourself in a position every single day as a tradesman that you need to rely on your knowledge and your skills to be safe, I can't guarantee your safety.
Sure.
I can't. Like, I don't care how good you are, man. you're going to make a mistake. You talked about open up those jumpers. I had an event just like that in New Hampshire one time. These guys were awesome, and they were rattled at their skill set the day that they missed putting the jumper in place. They were fighting the shoe and they're wrestling with it and they couldn't get it and they got frustrated and they just missed the jumper and they went and they cut the 34.5 and ball of fire and that stuff happens.
Yeah.
They were good linemen.
Yeah.
Anybody that went in the room trying to say those were bad linemen didn't know those guys. I knew those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys had a tremendous amount of pride in their abilities. They personally doubted their skills after that. Like, that's how much pride they had in their ability to do the craft. Like, you can't put yourself in a position to rely on your skills alone. So like we talk about like rubber cover, and I know like you hear the safety guys, oh, here comes the rubber cover police. Like, it's not the rubber cover police. Yes, you can go way, way, way too far with cover. No one that's ever been in a flash thought they were going to go to ground there. Like, think about that. Go to any burn unit and interview a lineman that just got out of a ball of fire, and if they thought that was where they were going to go to ground, I can promise you they would have had rubber there. And I worry that sometimes when we cover, we're covering like what we think we're going to get into, and we're not covering for what we could. And if you're covering what you think you're going to get into, you're relying on your skills to survive. And that's kind of a vulnerable place to be, right? So the mindset that we're trying to shift with the capacity is like, don't cover for what you think you're going to get into. Like, if you've got 4 foot of tap on the end of that stick, right? Do the math. If it could reach that far, to put cover, because you don't think you're going to go out there.
That's a really good point.
But the guy that got in the bark flash that didn't think he was going to go out there, dude, he ended up out there.
It's taking a second to detach and really look at like what's going on and what you're up to. And it's, I like that. Yeah. What does a good leader look like to you?
Man, I've always considered myself a student of leadership, and I've watched so many people. I think fundamentally to be a leader, you have to be driven to improve yourself first. Like, if you don't invest yourself, and it's funny, that book, The Go-Giver, is talking about giving, but one of the things it talks about is like, every now and then you got to pause and give to yourself too. Like, if you're not positioning yourself to know the trade, respect the trade, then you're not going to be able to give anything back, right? So most leaders I know are, I think, really driven around self-improvement. But I think, taking time to reach out and understand that you're growing other people and you're bringing people along with you, and the difference you're making today may never benefit you, but it's going to benefit that person way down the road. Like, I think about some of the folks that I consider mentors, and there's a couple of them are good buddies with me, right? We're going to go fishing up in Alaska this summer, right, on a chasing silvers, and I'm going to test this out with them. I'm going to tell them, like, man, hey, Lee, I bet you never realized I looked at you as a mentor. But the stuff you gave me when I was early in my career, like, dude, I'm largely where I'm at because of you, right? I think sometimes we think that like we gotta find a mentor and like you're my mentor, like,
sure.
But think about it as the person doing the mentoring. Like, you don't realize the impact you're having on people.
Mentors can be digital now too, for Pete's sake. Like, you might never meet them. They could be some, Navy SEAL guy that you follow on the internet or whatever, like somebody that wrote, like, The Go-Giver could be like a mentor to you, like, especially if they make content on a regular basis that helps, change your perspective on things and helps you grow as an individual and get better.
Yeah. Leadership's about giving to other people, and it's about positioning yourself to be able to have something to give. I think that's really important to understand about leadership. And you can't demand it. Leadership is a gift that's given to you. And I don't mean that like from a skills perspective. I mean that like the respect that people have to have. Like, if I look at you as a leader, that means I respect you in some way, shape, or form. And like, that respect that I gave you is a gift. And as a leader, I think you need to understand that it's a gift and kind of treat it that way, right?
For sure. I think good leaders do. So then what do you do, both personally and then maybe from the perspective of Quanta? Like, what do you do to raise up, grow leadership from under you? Also, what do you expect out of the leaders kind of below you that you manage, look after, nurture?
So it's something that I'm struggling with a lot right now is like I'm a problem solver by nature. I just like to fix stuff. So, in the responsibilities that I have today and the reach that I have, I'm across North America and Canada. Like I can't get hands on and fix problems anymore. Like last week, I was with one of our operations VPs for one of our companies, and we got into this. We were jazzed up. We were gonna fix it, right? Like we were on it. We're gonna fix it. And I was like, it's not my responsibility to fix that. Like I got to get his guy in there to fix that, right? Because you know what's happening if I went to fix it? I'm robbing that person of the opportunity to develop that skill.
Facts.
And that's super, super hard.
That's directly relatable to what we do too. That's the same as a foreman letting go and letting a junior lineman, give them a little bit more responsibility, empower them to, make some decisions.
Yeah, and it goes to a little bit. It goes to time isn't a commodity. Time's an investment. Right. So like you want to get in and do it because it's faster if I just jump in and do it right now. Right. But guess what? You're always 10 years from now, you'll still be the guy that has to do it. Why? Mm-hmm. Because you didn't help anybody else to learn that skill set. Right. So yeah, it's frustrating. The job's going to go slower. You're going to have to watch them bumble around with something that you wouldn't have to bumble around with for an hour. Right. You're going to have to watch them two-block themselves and maybe that's going to put more work on your shoulder because now you're going to have to jump in and help. But man, all that is precious. Like that's an investment because that person at the end of the day that got into that two-block, that jammed themselves up, like they learn how not to rig the next time. Yeah. Right.
How do you know, or how do you manage that, whether to step in or not and when to step in? And like from a leader's perspective and somebody that is managing in that way and trying to raise up leaders from underneath of you, how do you know when to step in or when not to step in? Or is it just intuitive? Is it something you just intuitively know?
Yeah, I think from a craft worker's perspective, I think it's about safety, right? So obviously if you can't let your crew get into a jam that's going to get them hurt, right? I was out on a job one time and we're talking about like the difference in communication skills. Like this guy actually had the communication skills really, really good. And we're kind of whispering to each other and he's watching his crew set up the rigging to clip the tangent in. And he's like, man, I'm watching what they're doing and this is exactly the jam you watch. Like, let's just sit here for a little bit and hang out. Like they're going to start yelling at each other in about 5 minutes. Right. And he just let them do it. Right. Because he knew they weren't going to get hurt.
Sure.
And he knew they was, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, they're yelling at each other, and he's like, "Let me step in, right? I got this." Like, I think it's about physical safety in the field, and I don't know much outside of physical safety that should really trump letting those life lessons, get in the way, right? And from a management perspective, kind of leading leaders, right? It's kind of the same thing. You don't want to let someone damage their career. Like I want to let somebody learn something. I got to let them make mistakes because you learn through mistakes, right? But you can't let them make a mistake that's going to damage their career and prevent them from growing. Like every move you make as a leader, the decision you make whether to engage or not engage is like, am I going to be able to enable them to grow? Like by not engaging and getting fixing it for them, like am I going to stop them from growing? Or am I going to keep them from getting into a position that would damage credibility, right? So those are all things you got to think about, right? It's some leadership I think is intuitive. Sometimes it just comes natural to us, but sometimes you got to sit there and you got to think about it. Like, you got to be deliberate, you know.
What are we doing right from the crew perspective? What are we doing right out there right now? And then what are we doing wrong? And what not necessarily just wrong, but what could we massively improve on?
You know, I think the investment in crew development is paying tremendous dues. Like, we put a lot of effort into education, right, and teaching the knowledge and the skills. You know, we talked about the dynamics. We're starting to get more into teaching crew leaders. One of the things that I think, you know, and I loved your feedback on the thought process, but I think about this sometimes too. Is like, I think about the role that a GF plays today and how is different than it was in the past. And I think we need to spend probably some more time working with that level and some of the leadership thoughts, because that job has changed so much. Like, I'm 25 years in the business, man. That job has changed 25 years a lot, right? Like, when 25 years ago, a GF, when you promoted a foreman, like, that guy's probably a foreman 3 years ago. You just didn't have the bandwidth. Like, there's nowhere to promote him, right?
Sure.
Like, so you were promoting foremen that had mastered their trade. They weren't just a JL. Like, they genuinely, like, mastered their craft by the time you promoted them for them. Like, which meant as a GF, I didn't need to teach them how to plan work, because, like, they'd been planning work on their own just as a guy on the crew for 2 or 3. Like, you're right, they had that skill. I was waiting for that opening to happen. Man, we're promoting people so much faster that we have a lot of really talented foremen, but there's folks that are still working on mastering the craft. And what does that do to the GF? That means the GF probably has to get engaged a little bit more on job planning than they did in the past. That means we need to help them shift their priorities, because, like, their plate's full. Like, what are they going to do? Not do their billing for the job?
Totally.
They're not going to do their timesheets, so they can step in and help you. Like, so how do we help them prioritize their day in a way that enables them to be a little bit more engaged with the work? I think is something we need to explore.
That's down the road of what I would suggest as well, is one, being a little more cautious of who you promote and how soon. And if we want that promotion to happen quick, because it needs to, because we have a copious amount of work and not enough people to do it, and we need good leaders, and we need to, like, do something to invest in getting them to that level, not just putting them there. And then watching who you put there, and, you know, be quick to move them backwards just as quick as you move them forwards. Like, if you put them in that position and it's just not the right time, or maybe just not even right for them, instead of just leaving them there because you need them, you need that position filled and you have no other options, man, that's not going to lead to good things, you know.
And I'm watching us do more of that. Like, that's actually putting me at ease. You know, what are we doing right? I'm watching us make those difficult decisions to, hey, that's not the right person in that role. Like, they're not ready. We thought they were ready. They're not ready. Let's pull them back. But we're also working to give people resources to continue to grow. Like, I'm not putting you in the penalty box. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a couple skills we want to work on with you before we put you in that pressure cooker. Again. But the other thing that, and this is where we're getting better at as well, is I think we're getting better at supporting people in the field. 20 years ago, I think we looked at training happen in the classroom. And one thing I realized early on, like with a lot of the resources I had, was so much of the training in our business happens in the field. So, you know, like I watch folks, like we have some really good transmission folks that they're not married to a job. They go from job to job, and we have someone struggling on a complex wire stringing job, and we send them out there and they're teaching the why, right? They're trying to replicate that knowledge base that they have. And I could have brought that foreman into a training room and trained them on building wire stringing plans, which, I mean, there's value there. Or I could have brought that guy that has all that experience, man, has been there, done that, and bring him out to the field where they're looking at the structures, they're looking at the breakover challenges that they have and some of the angles, and you know how much smarter he's going to be because of that field training that we did. And I think we're starting to do a lot more of that, but that translates over to leadership skills as well. And we have some really, I would argue, some of the best leadership classroom training in the business. That's only step one. I think where we're starting to figure it out is we got step two coming with level 2 with career leadership, which is really about, all right, so I told you in a classroom what good looks like. Let me give you someone that can mentor you on helping you figure out how to actually make that a reality on your job site today, where we're actually mentoring on those skill sets and those techniques. And the classroom starts the learning journey. That learning is mastered in the field. So how do we put the right people in the field that have the experience to help you take that knowledge and apply it to this complex situation that you're dealing with?
I think another miss on our part is like we like to designate that leadership title to like another title. We pair it with something like a foreman. So if you're a leader, you're a foreman or a general foreman. But you don't have to be a foreman in order to be a good leader. Like leadership can be, you can make an example of good leadership no matter what position you're in. Lineman, apprentice, groundman, operator. Like you can be a leader, but I don't think we recognize those leaders and how valuable they are. And sometimes when you take them and then you try to make them a foreman or you put them in that position, like I've seen really, 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 really great linemen that were fantastic leaders, and you put them in a foreman position, they crumble, they suck, it's not right for them. But then you stick them back in a lineman position and you don't treat them properly. Like you don't treat them the same, like, because they're sometimes even more valuable in that position because they're seen by the crew as just, like they're the guy on the crew that everybody looks up to because they're like one of the guys, or, like they're one of the crew. And I don't know, like I think we miss on that, and we miss developing them. We don't, like, because they're not a foreman, we don't bring them into the conversation, or we don't invest in further training to help build them.
And we don't enable them to be leaders. Like we don't use them tactically enough. So I'm going to compare it to an NHL story. So when I moved into Boston working for the utility, neighbor a block over was Sean Thornton, who played for the Bruins, right? Yeah. And that was 2010 when I moved in. They won the cup. Man, he had a dog, I had a dog, so we ended up, linking up. And first off, super human being. What a great guy. But man, he was never captain of the Boston Bruins. Like never named captain. You want to know who ran the Bruins? Sean Thornton. Yeah. Dude, that guy ran that locker room. When Patrice Bergeron was named captain, the first person he went to get advice? Sean Thornton, right? And Sean was never going to be. He just wasn't the player to be the captain, right? But they used him tactically all the time to help solve team dynamic issues, right? And that was his role, man, and he loved it, and he did it. Like, you're saying the same thing about crews. Like, we have journeyman linemen who will never be captain of the team, right? Yep. But they have the ability to have a huge impact. So, that's the complexity and the fun part, and probably why I fell in love with our business is, like, I can sit and have a complex conversation around grounding with an engineer this morning and then wind my way in a conversation about freaking crew dynamics and how do you set your crews up. Because I think we miss that. I think we miss opportunities to look at, like, man, if I pulled this guy out here, this guy might be that glue that puts the puzzle pieces together over here. Like, I don't think we look at it from that perspective often enough.
100% right. Yep. I think that's a miss, and we could try a little bit harder to help develop those people and leave them. You could think of it the same way in management, like in corporate setting as well. From my experiences in buildings like this, like there's people that are great leaders, but then you give them a group of people to manage, and they're not interested in it, but they're really, really valuable. So how do you build that person up? How do you get them to the same like, the level of pay they should be at, the responsibilities they should be at, be able to make decisions, but not have, a dozen people under them, because they just won't be successful in that.
But also being smart enough to know that person may not want to be there.
That's what, yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And there's two people that you can grow, I think, in two ways in a business. You can grow vertically, I mean, in terms of like leveling up, right? I can go from, foreman to GF to superintendent. I can go from director to VP. Like, that's leveling up growth. Then there's also just like, man, being passionate about being the best you can be in what you're doing today. And you know what? I don't need to go to the next level. I friggin' love what I'm doing today, and I want to be the best at it. And like, you're right. I don't know that we identify and value those people enough. Because you kind of need those. Not everybody's going to be promotable.
You have to have. They're so key, especially today. And there is businesses I've seen, or read about, businesses like Google that have, very high paid, like executive level people that manage absolutely zero people. But they're just like those people that are really invaluable at what they do. They're unreplaceable at what they do. They're the best at what they do. And it doesn't involve managing people, but yet still great leaders, great examples.
But let's take that back to the crew level. And we talked about time and investment, and there's also risk associated with growth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, man, I have this lineman that may never be a foreman, but he's an influencer. Right, like this person influences positivity on my crews. He gets production, drives safety at the level they're at. He's also on the most important project that I have. And I have a crew over here that's struggling, may not be on, they're struggling. I wouldn't put them on this critical project because of the struggles they're having. But that's the person that could help fix them. Like, is it a risk to pull them out of that productive project and slot them over to maybe the less critical project? That's an investment in that crew's future, right? Now, I do that. I take a little bit of a hit on the critical project to invest in that crew. Maybe that's an individual that makes that clicks with somebody that becomes the next foreman, right? And we don't think long game. We play the short game too often.
100%. 100%. I love that. There's tons of value in that conversation. Quanta's big company, spans, like we said, many states, multiple countries. How do you manage, or how do we manage, like, complexities of, safety differences and stuff across countries and across states? How do you manage all that?
Don't make decisions centrally. Give people the ability to figure it out locally. And that's the beauty of Quanta. And that's what enables, like, man, through my career, I've never really been attracted at like a corporate role. Like, I like being where the action's at, and I've always looked up at corporate as like these people that are like totally disconnected and they make decisions that don't make any sense. One of the things I think that we're really good at is I think Quanta positions leaders to think about the future. I think they position us well to come up with visions, but they don't expect me to figure out how to execute that in Milwaukee. Because let me tell you right now, if I flew up to Milwaukee next week and told them how to execute the capacity model, I'm probably going to get them all screwed up, right? Gotcha. What they position me really well to do is to build the vision, develop the tools I need to help those folks in Milwaukee figure out how to execute it locally. Because the dynamics they have in Milwaukee are totally different than the non-union dynamics in South Carolina, are totally different than some of the pressure cookers we have in some of the other parts. Like, I can't make that decision here. And there's, quite frankly, I'll never know things detailed enough across North America to make those local decisions. So I think that's one of the keys to our success. And as we're growing, we're getting better and better at it. I think we've been good at enabling people in the past. What we're getting better at is clearly articulating the vision and developing the tools we need to enable people to execute that.
Love that. Industry, blue collar industry, notoriously hard on mental health. I want to explore what is maybe what we're doing to help support mental health of craft workers, craft laborers. What do you see going forward? Is there improvements, advancements? What kind of changes are happening? Let's explore.
Man, such an important topic. I think first off, there's again in a humble way, like there's a responsibility that comes with being at Quanta in terms of like the reach that we have is so much bigger than just Quanta, right? Like we can influence how the trade community tackles this. So I'll give Matt Comfort a ton of credit, man. He's been out on the front. Like I think we're starting to latch on to, I think what is ultimately going to be the tool we're going to use, and it's really about building. The idea is about building connectors. Like how to build a network of people that know how to help folks and not make the overall environment safe, but like I don't want to bring my issues to everybody, but I know if I can pull you aside, I can talk to you quick about what I'm struggling with, and you're a bridge to some help. Right? I think we've got a tool that we're working on that'll be really special, and I think will help lead the way. So I think that's on the macro level in terms of like strategy. I think we're really close to having that strategy in place, and Matt's working really, really hard to bring that to fruition so that we can bring it to industry. I know we've met with, he had meetings a week ago with the IBW with some regulatory folks. So we're working really, really hard at the national level to tackle it. So let me get to the micro, and my thought on that is I think we need to shift people's thoughts about it, right? Like, listen, man, we're not a touchy-feely business, and this is a super touchy-feely topic. So it's not realistic to think like we're going to turn the line trade into a touchy-feely group. It's just, that's not the business, right? Yeah. But can we start having different conversations in ways that like they see that it is okay to kind of talk about this, and you're not weak having the conversation. So like my own personal experiences, my father died by suicide. Vietnam vet, radio guy, Bronze Star. I mean, he was in it, right? And when he came home, he struggled, man. And I never knew. First off, like growing up, like you're a kid. How do you help how do you help your family or something? You don't know. You're not equipped to do it, right? Yeah. But by the time I was in my 20s, man, I didn't know what to do to help him with his struggles. Man, I had no clue. I didn't know where to go, and it certainly wasn't cool as a 20-year-old trying to make a name for myself to go into work and be like, hey, man, I got this problem at home. Like, help me figure this out, guys. Like, I never really knew where to go, right? And there's a long story to it, as there always is, but I think making it okay for people to say, dude, I got a problem that I'm dealing with, like, help me figure this out. I think that's really important. So interestingly enough, one of the principles that we talk about in the capacity model is like how we respond matters. Dude, I think that's super critical when we see somebody struggling with an issue. Like how you respond totally matters. You may not have the solution, but just responding in a way that shows like you're cool to have this conversation. Like, hey, let's jump in my truck real quick and talk. Like, I think that's super critical. I think beyond just talking about it, I think it needs to be okay for people to understand, like going out and talking to a counselor or whoever. That's normal. Dude, I've done it. Yeah. Like, listen, man, I had my father going on. I had my mother having health issues, and I got to a point where I was like, man, I got some stuff I'm not figuring out. Like, so, like, I went and I spent some time, year and a half, talking with someone. Dude, that person helped me figure out some things about life that I wasn't able to embrace, right? Now, does that make me weak? Hell no. Like, look where I am now.
Yeah.
Look where I am now. Like, I wouldn't be where I'm at if I didn't have someone help me figure out some of those troubles, right? Yeah. it's okay to do that. Like going out and having someone help you be a better person is a really like good thing, right?
I put a post up yesterday. It was somebody else wrote the quote, and I'm paraphrasing. Can't remember it exactly, but it was like something along the lines of stop asking people for directions to places they've never been themselves. And I kind of come back to that with, if you're struggling on the crew and you go to your buddy that you work with and you're reaching out for help, it can be hard because I'm not equipped to deal with somebody else's, or like maybe give the right advice, or like I'm basing it entirely off of my background, my training. And if I don't have training in how to talk to somebody about issues, but it's a good start. And then I like that we have the ability now with things like BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com, where you can actually text-based therapy, just getting a professional on the other end of the line is super important. And take advantage of these programs. There are programs out there, lots of companies are coming up with programs for dealing with mental health or suicide prevention or things like that can really make the difference. And just encourage people, that first step is the hardest step, but take that first step because it's worth it. You're valuable here,
So you think you're too badass to reach out for help? You will be stronger after you get that help.
Yeah.
You'll be even more of a badass afterwards, right? Because now you can deal I'm 10 times stronger because I spent some time talking to someone. I'm 10 times stronger. I would never be as strong as I am today if I didn't say, man, I'm going to help. Let's spend some time in this, right? Let's see what they can do for me, man. And you got to look past that. I think there's this stigma of weakness, man, or how are people going to perceive me? I think we need to respect people. We need to respect the hell out of people that took the step to reach out and get help, because you're right. That's hard. You know what stops most people? And this stopped my father a lot because I know he would vocalize it, was the stigma of reaching out to help.
Yeah.
Right? So many people don't get the help they need because they think there's going to be this stigma attached that they're broken, right? If they reach out to help. Dude, you're not broken. Yeah. You're only broken if you don't fix yourself.
100%. Everybody has problems. Everybody has problems. Yeah. Interesting. Can you expand on any of those programs you're working on, or things that we're doing to help make this better for people?
Yeah. So what Matt, through his connections and time kind of dedicated trying to understand the issue, we've latched on it and Quanah's reach, right? We have some operations in Quanah in Australia, and as with a lot of this stuff, we think of America leads the way, but there's a lot of stuff where the rest of the world kind of is more advanced than we are. So we were able to see what's going on in Australia. This group called Mates in Construction. Man, it's a phenomenal model. It's been super effective there. So we're looking at that model and we're exploring how do we make that happen here. And again, it's all about what you talked about, connectivity, but at a realistic level, at my service center. I know, it's not so if I say, hey, just go out and talk to somebody, well, what does that mean? Somebody, who the hell is somebody? But if I say, hey, Mike's the guy, I know I can go talk to Mike, right? It makes it that much more executable. And by the way, Mike now is equipped and knows how to funnel you into the resources that are there to be able to help you. So it's building those type of dynamics. But as with anything else in our world, you can't think, you got to think how do we get that everywhere? Mm-hmm. And that's it's going to take time. But most of what we do here, we're patient and we're going to do it right. Right. So we're funneling it through the processes. We're doing a lot of work. Hey, maybe that's not where we end up. Maybe in the time that we go through this, we find a smarter way to do business. But yeah, we're moving really hard on that right now.
I love that. One last kind of question. In bridging the gap between safety professionals and the trade, the workers, craft labor, what are some things? We touched on quite a few of them already, but is there anything else, just to like put a bow on it, anything else that we can do to help bridge that gap and help communicate better, like immediate action steps, like something we could take away now and start implementing and do to help make that better?
I kind of said it, but don't assume that your safety guy knows how to work with you. Like, don't make that assumption, man. Like, it's if you want that person to make you better, and I'll tell you, like, a safety person doesn't have to know everything there is about your work to be valuable to you, right? We're in a really weird position where we look at work differently than you do, and we bring our own unique perspective. Like, I don't have to know the details behind gloving techniques for 23 kV versus 34.5 to see that I got a foreman that's struggling with safety, right?
Yeah.
I don't need that for a lot of the stuff. I mean, dude, we need that. I don't want to dispute it. Like, the more we know about that, obviously, the better. But fundamentally, like, we all bring a different value. And if you're at that level, and if you're a foreman, if you're a GF, and you want to get better, use every resource you have around you, right? And the taking time to have a sandwich with that guy once a month and get their perspective, whether you agree with it or not, is valuable, right? And let me tell you, the first time you might not find value in that conversation because they're going to be feeling you out. Because, by the way, it's not always safe to tell you your baby's ugly.
Yeah.
Like, that's like, try being a safety guy walking into a hardcore GF's office and be like, dude, stuff's all messed up right now. Let's have a conversation. Like, that ain't an easy thing to do. So, like, the first time you go seeking that feedback, don't be surprised they ain't gonna give it to you. Yeah. But you keep doing that, and eventually what you're gonna build is that relationship. Yeah. You're gonna build that relationship where now you understand their perspective. They're starting to understand your perspective. Maybe explain to safety why you're making some of the decisions. I think sometimes we just watch decisions be made, and we're sitting here baffled on being like, dude, I just talked to you about what was going on. Like, how are you not fixing this? Well, I guarantee you there's a rationality behind it. I just don't know what that is. So maybe sometimes, like, invest in that relationship. If you're not going to act on what the safety guy gives you, having a conversation. Like, don't be afraid to tell us the truth. Yeah. Like, tell us what's going on. That's only going to help me help you better.
Love it. Thanks, David.
Cool.
I hope you guys got some value out of that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to draw your awareness to a couple of other things. So we make these podcasts, yes, but it's not the only thing that we put out as far as content. Our social medias are full of valuable cuts from the podcast itself, as well as just a bunch of other educational stuff and entertainment. So go follow us at Powerline Podcast on all social media platforms. And then also YouTube. I don't think that a lot of you are aware of this, but we don't just load these podcasts onto YouTube. We also make vlogs, which are super educational, entertaining, great place to direct people to learn about the industry, learn about the trade, or just learn about what's going on within either Quanta or the Powerline industry in general. So hit up our YouTube channel. Again, it's at Powerline Podcast. You can catch those vlogs on there. We also load a bunch of other extra content in video form. We try to up the quality every time we do this. We try to up that quality. So hit up the YouTube channel and make sure you're subbed to all those platforms. Appreciate you guys. Hope to see you again soon. We'll see you again soon. Peace.